Your past doesn't disqualify your future. You have to understand this. Not just hear it, not just nod along, but understand it in a way that grips you at your core. Because the truth is, the very thing you believe has ruined you, the thing that haunts you when the room gets quiet, the thing that whispers to you that you're not good enough, not strong enough, not worthy enough, that thing is lying to you. It's a deception, a carefully crafted illusion designed to keep you from stepping into what's actually possible. Think about it. How many times have you held yourself back because you've let your past define you? How many opportunities have you walked away from, not because you weren't capable, but because some small, insidious voice inside told you that you couldn't? And yet, here's the paradox. Every great story, every compelling transformation, every person who has ever done something meaningful has faced that same voice. The difference is in what they chose to do next. There is an idea deeply rooted in all of us that our past somehow writes our future in ink. That because we have failed before, we are doomed to fail again. That because we have been rejected, we are unworthy of acceptance. That because we have fallen, we are incapable of standing. And that is one of the most destructive beliefs a person can hold. Because what it does, without you even realizing it, is rob you of choice. It tells you that you are fixed, immovable, defined entirely by something that is already behind you. But that is not true. It has never been true. You are becoming something right now, every day, every decision, every thought, every reaction, every challenge. These are shaping you into a person who did not exist yesterday. The past is not a prison sentence. It is raw material. It is something to be understood, learned from, transformed. The past is not the architect of your future. You are. Now, this is where people get stuck. Because they hear this and they think, well, that sounds nice, but you don't know the mistakes I've made. You don't know the weight I carry. And you're right. I don't. But here's what I do know. Whatever you have done, whatever failures you have stacked up like bricks on your back, whatever shame you have allowed to settle into your bones, it is not more powerful than your ability to change. It does not have more authority over your future than you do. And the moment you start acting like that's true, your entire world will shift. See, people want to be free from their past, but they don't want to go through the discomfort of breaking the patterns that their past has created. They want a new future, but they don't want to sacrifice the familiarity of the old one. They want transformation, but they don't want to face the parts of themselves that need to be reckoned with before that transformation can take place. You are not the same person who made those mistakes. You are not the same person who was hurt, who was lost, who was afraid. But if you act like you are, if you carry yourself like you are, then in a way you are making it true. Not because it is true, but because you are reinforcing the past instead of stepping into something new. This is why some people stay stuck for years. This is why they repeat the same cycles, why they fall into the same patterns, why they never seem to move forward. Not because they can't, but because they have allowed their past to become their identity instead of their history. Your past is meant to be a teacher, not a master. It is meant to give you wisdom, not chains. It is meant to refine you, not define you. And when you start seeing it that way, when you stop treating it as an anchor and start treating it as a lesson, you will realize something extraordinary. You were never as stuck as you thought you were. That's when everything changes. Because when you finally see that the only thing keeping you trapped is you, you also see that you are the one with the key. You have the capacity to rewrite your own story, not by erasing what happened, but by deciding what it means. You have the ability to turn regret into wisdom, pain into strength, failure into momentum. But none of that happens until you take responsibility for what happens next. So stop waiting. Stop acting like your past is the most important thing about you. Stop telling yourself that you are incapable of change. Stop feeding the voice that says you are broken beyond repair. You are not, you never were. And if you can grasp that, if you can truly accept that your past does not disqualify your future, then there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that can stop you. You are carrying something greater than your pain. You may not see it yet, you may not feel it, but it's there. It's always been there, beneath the weight of everything you've endured. Behind the scars, beneath the layers of doubt, fear, and hesitation, there is something inside you that refuses to be destroyed. And it is waiting for you to recognize it, waiting for you to stop focusing on everything that's happened to you and start realizing what is trying to come through you. Pain has this way of convincing you that it's the most important thing about you. It demands your attention. It shapes your thoughts. It dictates your choices. And before you even realize it, it becomes the lens through which you see the world. But that's not the whole story. That's not even the right story, because pain is not an identity. It is an experience. And experiences are meant to shape you, not to define you. Think about this for a second. If everything in your life had gone exactly the way you planned, if you had never faced hardship, never encountered obstacles, never suffered loss, would you be the person you are today? Would you have developed resilience? Would you understand perseverance? Would you have gained the wisdom to navigate life's complexities? The answer is obvious. Without adversity, there is no growth. Without struggle, there is no strength. So what if, just for a moment, you stopped seeing your pain as proof of your limitations and started seeing it as evidence of something greater being forged within you? What if the very thing that made you question yourself is actually the thing that is preparing you? What if your hardship is not a punishment, but a process, a necessary transformation to equip you for what is coming next? There is something in you that refuses to quit. There is something in you that survived when it would have been easier to give up. That alone should tell you something. That alone should make you stop and reconsider the way you've been framing your own story. Because if pain was truly the most powerful force in your life, then you wouldn't be here right now, but you are. And that means something. That has to mean something. The people who accomplish extraordinary things, the ones who rise above circumstances that would have buried anyone else, they are not the ones who have lived pain-free lives. They are not the ones who have been shielded from hardship. They are the ones who refused to let their suffering become their ceiling. The ones who looked at their wounds and said, "This will not break me." The ones who took their pain and built something from it, something stronger, something wiser, something more. And that is a choice you can make right now. You can choose to see your pain as the end of your story, or you can choose to see it as the beginning of something greater. You can choose to stay trapped in the narrative of what happened to you, or you can choose to step into the truth of what is trying to emerge from you. There is something greater than your pain, and you know it. You felt it in the moments where hope flickered despite everything. You've sensed it in the way you keep moving forward even when you don't know how. You've glimpsed it in the small victories, the quiet moments of clarity, the times when you almost gave up but didn't. That wasn't just survival. That was evidence of something greater at work in you. But here's the thing. If you want to fully step into that, you have to be willing to let go of the identity that pain has given you. You have to stop holding on to suffering as if it's the most valuable thing you possess. You have to be willing to lay it down, to make space for something new. And that is not easy, because pain can become comfortable. It can become familiar. It can trick you into believing that it's safer to stay in the struggle you know than to step into the unknown of something better. But you have to do it anyway. You have to trust that the version of you that is waiting on the other side of this is worth the effort. You have to believe that your suffering was not for nothing, that it was never meant to be the conclusion, only the catalyst. Because the truth is, the world does not need more people who are defined by their wound. The world needs people who have taken their pain and turned it into something powerful. People who have walked through the fire and emerged with something to offer, something to build, something to give. And that is you. Whether you believe it yet or not, that is you. You are carrying something greater than your pain. And the moment you decide to step into that, the moment you stop letting your past dictate your potential, everything will change. Transformation starts with permission, and not permission from the world, not from your past, not from the people who have doubted you or underestimated you or placed limits on you. Permission from you. Because nobody else can give you what you refuse to claim for yourself. Nobody else can decide that you are worthy of change, worthy of growth, worthy of something more, except you. But here's the problem. Most people are waiting for the right moment, waiting for some external validation, waiting for life to give them a sign that it's time to move forward. And in the waiting, they convince themselves that the reason they haven't changed is because they can't, because there's something holding them back. But the truth, the hard truth, the uncomfortable truth is that they haven't changed because they haven't allowed themselves to. That's difficult to hear, isn't it? Because it puts the responsibility squarely on you. It forces you to ask yourself, have I really been stuck, or have I just been afraid to move? Have I been trapped by my circumstances, or have I simply not given myself permission to step beyond them? See, we like to think that our limitations are external, that it's our past or our environment or the expectations of others keeping us small. And while all of those things might be obstacles, they are not decisions. They are not the final say. The final say belongs to you. And that is both terrifying and liberating, because it means that if you want something to change, if you want yourself to change, it starts with a choice. But making that choice requires something most people aren't willing to face. It requires looking at yourself honestly. It requires admitting that some of the suffering you've endured wasn't just because of what happened to you, it was because you refused to take ownership of what happens next. And that's a painful realization. But it's also the beginning of something extraordinary, because the second you stop waiting for permission from the world, the second you stop waiting for everything to be perfect before you start moving, that's when transformation begins. The reason so many people stay stuck is because they are waiting for certainty before they act. They want guarantees. They want to know that if they take the risk, it will work out. That if they leave the toxic relationship, they'll find love again. That if they pursue the dream, they won't fail. That if they step into something new, they won't regret it. But that's not how life works. That's never been how life works. You don't get certainty before you act. You get certainty because you act. Because once you start moving, once you start stepping into something new, you prove to yourself that you can. And that's where confidence comes from. That's where growth happens. Not in waiting for permission, but in deciding that you don't need it. Think about this. How much of your life has been spent negotiating with yourself? How much time have you wasted debating whether or not you deserve happiness, success, freedom? How many moments have slipped through your fingers because you were too busy waiting for someone else to tell you that it was okay to go after them? And why? Why do we do this? Why do we doubt ourselves even when something inside us is begging for change? It's because permission is safe. It's familiar, it's predictable, but safety is not the same as fulfillment, and predictability is not the same as purpose. So what are you waiting for? Are you waiting for the fear to disappear? Because it won't. Are you waiting for the perfect conditions? Because they don't exist? Are you waiting for life to hand you an invitation to finally become who you were meant to be? Because that's never going to happen. The only permission that matters is the one you give yourself. The only green light you need is the one you decide to turn on. And when you finally do, when you finally step into your own authority, when you finally claim the power that has always been yours, that's when everything changes. God's timing is not your timing, but his plan is perfect. And that's a hard thing to accept when you're standing in the middle of uncertainty. When you feel like you've done everything you were supposed to do and still the doors remain closed. It's hard when you've worked and waited and sacrificed, only to find yourself asking, why hasn't it happened yet? Why am I still stuck? Why does it feel like I'm being overlooked, forgotten, left behind? It's frustrating, isn't it, to know that you're capable of more, to feel the weight of potential pressing against your chest, and yet no matter what you do, it feels like life is saying, not yet. You start questioning yourself. Maybe you misheard. Maybe you're not as ready as you thought. Maybe you weren't meant for it at all. But here's what you have to understand. Delay is not denial. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Just because the door hasn't opened doesn't mean the way isn't being prepared. Timing is everything. And the difference between something breaking you and something building you is when it arrives. Because the right thing at the wrong time can still ruin you. We think we're ready. We think we know best. But how many times have you looked back at something you desperately wanted and realized, if I had gotten it then, I wouldn't have been able to handle it. If I had stepped into it too soon, it would have crushed me. Growth isn't just about getting what you want. It's about becoming who you need to be in order to sustain it. And sometimes that means waiting. But waiting doesn't mean wasting time. Waiting is the work. Waiting is where the refining happens, where the lessons take root, where character is built. Because what's worse than not getting what you want? Getting it before you're ready and watching it slip through your fingers because you weren't prepared to carry it. So the question isn't, why is it taking so long? The question is, what am I supposed to be learning in this season? What is being developed in me that I will need later? What habits, what discipline, what patience is being required of me now so that I don't collapse under the weight of what's coming next? We want the outcome, but we don't want the process. We want the reward, but we don't want to be tested. We want the breakthrough, but we don't want to break. And yet the process is where we become. The fire is what forges us. The struggle is where we are strengthened. You don't become wise without walking through uncertainty. You don't become strong without carrying something heavy. You don't become ready without first enduring the not yet. But here's what happens when you trust the timing, when you surrender to the fact that just because you can't see the full picture doesn't mean there isn't one. You stop striving. You stop living in a constant state of frustration trying to force something into existence before it's time. You stop comparing your journey to others, wondering why they got there first, why it seems easier for them, why their path looks smoother than yours. Comparison will rob you of peace. It will make you think that just because someone else has arrived, you must be late. But you're not late. You're on schedule. Their path is their path. Their timeline is their timeline. And yours? Yours is unfolding exactly the way it's supposed to. What's meant for you will not pass you. It won't arrive a second too early or a moment too late. It will come when you are ready to receive it, to hold it, to steward it well. And until then, the best thing you can do is keep preparing, keep becoming, keep showing up as the person who will be able to handle what's coming next, because it is coming. And when it does, you will know it was always right on time. There is a version of you that exists beyond everything you've been through. A version of you that has not been broken by disappointment, that has not been weighed down by the doubts that creep in late at night. A version of you that is not defined by the mistakes you've made, the opportunities you've missed, or the struggles that have tried to convince you that you are less than what you truly are. That version of you is waiting. It's waiting for you to stop negotiating with your past. It's waiting for you to stop giving your pain the power to decide your future. It's waiting for you to recognize that you don't have to stay where you've been just because it's familiar. See, we tell ourselves stories about who we are, and over time we start to believe them. We convince ourselves that we are trapped by our circumstances, that we are limited by our past, that we are at the mercy of whatever life decides to throw our way. And if we believe that long enough, we stop fighting, we stop reaching, we settle into this small, predictable version of life, not because it's all we're capable of, but because we've accepted the lie that it's all we deserve. But what if you let go of that? What if for just a moment you consider the possibility that the limits you've accepted aren't real? That the things you've believed about yourself, the ones that keep you small, keep you afraid, keep you from stepping fully into the life you were meant for, are not truth, but just conditioning? What if you allowed yourself to believe that there is more for you, that you are not done growing, that you are not finished becoming, that your greatest, most fulfilled, most powerful self is still ahead of you? Because the truth is, you cannot carry your past into your future and expect to arrive anywhere new. You cannot hold on to the version of you that was built for survival and expect to thrive. You cannot continue to wear the labels that others have placed on you, the ones that told you who you were, what you could do, what you couldn't do, and then expect to step into something greater. At some point, you have to decide that your story isn't over, Decide that your past is a chapter, not a conclusion. Decide that whatever has tried to break you will not define you. But here's the thing. Transformation is not a passive process. You don't wake up one day and suddenly become the person you were meant to be. You become that person by making different choices, by letting go of what no longer serves you, by stepping into the unknown even when it's terrifying, by choosing to believe that your future is worth the discomfort of change. And change is uncomfortable. It is inconvenient. It requires sacrifice. It demands that you release what is easy in favor of what is necessary. It forces you to step into uncertainty, to walk forward without knowing exactly where you're going, to trust that the version of you that you are becoming will know what to do when you get there. Most people don't do it. Most people stay in the life that is comfortable, even when it is unfulfilling. They stay in relationships that no longer bring them joy. They stay in jobs that drain them. They stay in cycles of self-doubt, of procrastination, of fear, not because they want to, but because it feels safer than the unknown. But safety is not the same as growth. Comfort is not the same as purpose. And so the real question is this: are you willing to become the version of yourself that your future requires? Are you willing to shed the parts of you that were built in fear? Are you willing to let go of the need to control every outcome, to step into something greater, even when you don't have all the answers? Are you willing to lose the version of you that is small, hesitant, and afraid in order to gain the version of you that is bold, strong, and unstoppable? Because the future is waiting. The version of you that is capable of stepping into everything you've been hoping for, praying for, dreaming about, that version of you is real. But you will never meet them if you keep living like the past is all there is. You will never meet them if you keep treating your history as if it is your destiny. You can change, you can grow, you can become, but only if you decide that where you've been is not where you're meant to stay.